Ethan Carter dropped to one knee on the marble floor, grabbed the base of the wheelchair, and wrenched a steel panel loose with his bare hands. Metal shrieked. The woman in the chair jerked backward. "What do you think you're doing?" she snapped. "You can't just—" "I already did," Ethan said, lifting a small black bolt into the light. "Somebody's been lying to you, ma'am, and I'd bet my last dollar you've been paying them to do it." Victoria Whitmore hadn't walked in 3 years. Every doctor called it permanent. But the single dad repairman had just found the one thing all of them missed: a secret bolted inside her wheelchair. Before we go any further, do me a favor. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from tonight so I can see just how far this story travels. And if you believe some people aren't broken by accident, but broken on purpose by folks they trusted, then subscribe, settle in, and stay with me all the way to the end. Because what Ethan Carter found inside that chair was only the beginning. The garage smelled like coffee and cold metal, and Ethan Carter had been awake since 4. I wasn't a young man anymore. 51 gray coming in at the temples, hands that had been cut and burned and set wrong a dozen times over. But those hands still worked, and in Ethan's experience, that was most of what a man could ask for. "Dad." Lily's voice came from the kitchen doorway. 8 years old, hair a mess, one sock on. "There's no more cereal. There's oatmeal. I hate oatmeal. You hated it yesterday too, and you ate it. That's 'cause you put syrup on it." Ethan set down the alternator he'd been rebuilding and wiped his hands on a rag that had stopped being clean sometime around Christmas. "Then I'll put syrup on it. Get your shoes. Both of them." "That's usually how it works, sweetheart." She grinned at him, the gap in her front teeth showing, and for 1 second, the whole weight of the morning lifted right off his chest. That was the thing nobody warned you about being a single father. It wasn't the money, though. The money was always tight. It wasn't the loneliness, though, that came at night like a tide. It was the way a kid could break your heart and put it back together in the same 10 seconds and never even know she'd done it. Ethan's wife, Sarah, had been gone 4 years. Cancer. Fast, then slow, then fast again at the end. He didn't talk about it much. When people asked how he was holding up, he said, "Fine," and they believed him because they wanted to. He'd been a mechanical engineer once. Good one, too. Aerospace contracts, medical device, designed, the kind of work that came with a badge and a parking spot and a salary that meant Lily would never want for anything. Then Sarah got sick, and Ethan walked away from all of it to be home with her. And by the time it was over, the badge was gone, and the parking spot was gone, and the man who used to fill them didn't quite exist anymore. So now he fixed things. Wheelchairs, hospital beds, scooters, lifts. The stuff people gave up on. He put an ad in the paper and one online, and the calls came in slow but steady, and it kept the lights on, and Lily fed, and his mind occupied, which some days mattered more than the money. His phone buzzed against the workbench. "Carter Repair," he said. "Mr. Carter." A woman's voice clipped professional. "My name is Diane Foss. I'm the estate manager for Ms. Victoria Whitmore. We have a piece of medical equipment that requires servicing, and your name was recommended." Ethan reached for the pencil he kept behind his ear. "What kind of equipment?" "A wheelchair. A rather sophisticated one. Our usual technician is unavailable, and Ms. Whitmore's condition makes it a priority." "What's wrong with it?" A pause. "That's rather the issue. Nothing appears to be wrong with it. But Ms. Whitmore insists it doesn't feel right. She's been in it for 3 years, Mr. Carter. She'd know." "She would," Ethan agreed. He'd learned that early the person in the chair always knew more than the specs did. "Where am I headed?" Diane gave him an address. Ethan wrote it down, and then he stopped writing because he knew that address. Everybody in the county knew that address. The Whitmore estate sat up on the ridge above the river, like something out of an old movie. Iron gates and a driveway longer than most streets. "That's a serious place," he said. "It's a serious woman," Diane replied. "Can you come today?" Ethan looked at Lily wrestling with a shoe on the kitchen floor. "School drop-off at 8. Estate up on the ridge 40 minutes each way." "I can be there by 10, he said. The gate opened before he even reached the intercom, which meant somebody was watching, which meant the kind of people who watched. Ethan drove his 15-year-old pickup up a driveway lined with trees that had clearly cost more than the truck, and he parked it next to a black car that had definitely cost more than his house. A woman in a gray suit was waiting on the steps. Diane Foss, he figured. She had the look of somebody who ran 100 things at once and dropped none of them. Mr. Carter. Ms. Foss. She looked at his truck, then at his boots, then at the toolbox in his hand, and Ethan watched her do the arithmetic that people like her always did. He was used to it. He'd stopped minding it years ago. She's difficult, Diane said not unkindly as she led him inside. I want you to know that going in. She's not rude for the sake of it. She's a woman who used to run everything, and now she can't run anything, and it's made her sharp. Don't take it personally. I never do. Good. Diane stopped at a set of double doors. One more thing. Don't tell her it's going to be okay. Don't tell her you understand. She's heard it from 100 people who didn't mean it, and it makes her want to throw things. Ethan almost smiled. I'll keep my opinions to myself. See that you do. She opened the doors. The room was huge, a study floor-to-ceiling windows, more books than Ethan had ever seen outside a library. But he barely registered any of it because in the middle of the room, in a wheelchair that gleamed like it had been machined by NASA, sat a woman who looked at him the way a hawk looks at a field mouse. Victoria Whitmore. 50 maybe. Sharp cheekbones, sharper eyes, dark hair pulled back tight. She'd been beautiful once in the way magazines meant, and she was still beautiful now in a way that had teeth in it. So, she said, the mechanic. Repairman, Ethan said. Mechanic's a compliment I haven't earned yet. Something flickered across her face. Not a smile, but something. Diane tells me you fix wheelchairs. I fix things. Wheelchairs are usually the easy part. This one has been serviced by 3 different specialists in the last 6 months. Do you know what they told me? I got a guess. That there's nothing wrong with it. Victoria's hands tightened on the armrests. That it's operating exactly as designed. That the problem, and I'm quoting the last one directly, is likely psychological. Ethan set his toolbox down. You believe that. Does it matter what I believe? To me it does. You're the one who's been sitting in it for 3 years. You're the one who feels it every day. Some fellow with a clipboard shows up for 40 minutes and tells you it's in your head. Ethan shook his head. I'd want to throw something too. For a long moment, Victoria Whitmore just looked at him. Diane warned you, she said flatly. She did. About the throwing. She was very specific. And then Victoria laughed, one short, surprised bark of a laugh, like it had gotten out before she could stop it. Well, she said, at least you're honest. Fix it or don't, Mr. Carter. I stopped hoping a long time ago. That's fine, Ethan said, kneeling down beside the chair. Hope's not really my department. Bolts are. He worked in silence for the first 10 minutes, and Victoria let him. Though he could feel her watching every move. The chair was genuinely a marvel. Custom-built carbon fiber frame powered assist, a pressure management seat, and something Ethan didn't expect to find on a wheelchair at all. A full suite of what looked like rehabilitation assist actuators, built right into the leg supports. He ran his fingers along them, frowning. This is a rehab chair, he said almost to himself. What? These, he tapped one of the leg supports. These aren't just for support. This is a rehabilitation system. Powered range of motion resistance training, the whole setup. This chair was built to help you get stronger. Victoria's voice went cold. Then it's broken, because I have gotten nothing but weaker. Ethan pulled a small light from his pocket and shone it up under the seat frame. Who prescribed you this chair? My medical team. After the accident. Which accident? There was only one, Mr. Carter. Her tone sharpened. 3 years ago. My car went off an embankment. Spinal trauma. Incomplete injury. I retained some sensation, but no functional movement below the waist. Is this really necessary? Incomplete, Ethan repeated. He sat back on his heels. You said incomplete. That's the medical term. I know what the term means. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time there was something careful in his voice. Incomplete means the cord wasn't fully severed. Incomplete means, in a lot of cases, there's a path back. Not always. But it's a whole different animal than complete. I'm aware of the distinction. Were you told about it? Victoria's mouth opened, then closed. I was told, she said slowly, that recovery was unlikely, that I should focus on adapting rather than hoping. By who? By everyone. Her voice cracked just slightly on the word, and Ethan watched her hate herself for it. By every doctor, every specialist, my own family. Do you know what it's like, Mr. Carter, to have 20 educated people tell you the same thing over and over until you finally believe it? Until believing anything else feels like a child's fantasy. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. I do, actually. Something in the way he said it made her stop, but he'd already turned back to the chair. He went at it harder now, pulled off the seat cushion, ran his light along the seams, opened the access panel on the underside of the frame and stopped. Huh, he said. What? He didn't answer. He reached in, felt around, and came out holding a thin cable that ran between two components. This shouldn't be here. I don't understand. This rehab system I told you about, the one built to help you get stronger. Ethan traced the cable with his finger. It's been disconnected, not broken, not worn out, disconnected. Somebody unplugged it and tucked the cable off to the side where you'd never see it. Victoria went very still. Maybe it was never installed properly. It was installed perfectly. That's the thing. Somebody who knew exactly what they were doing built this system in, and then somebody who knew exactly what they were doing turned it off. Ethan looked up at her. Those are two different somebodies, or the same one who changed their mind. Either way, it wasn't an accident. That's absurd. Maybe. He reached deeper, felt something, and his frown deepened. But that's not the only thing. For the next 20 minutes, Ethan Carter took Victoria Whitmore's wheelchair apart, the way a surgeon opens a patient carefully, methodically, and with a growing look on his face that made Diane, who had come to stand silently in the doorway, take a step into the room. Mr. Carter, Diane said, give me a second. He pulled a small panel from the underside of the seat, and behind it, he found a control module, a little black box with a series of settings, dials the kind that a technician would adjust and a patient would never see. This is the master configuration, Ethan said. Everything about how this chair behaves runs through here. The assist level, the resistance, the pressure system, the rehab actuators. He shone his light on it, and his jaw tightened. And every single one of these settings has been changed. Changed how? Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper now. The powered assist is cranked all the way up, which means the chair does everything for you. Every time you'd normally have to use a muscle reaching, shifting, pushing, the chair does it instead. You've been sitting in a machine designed to make sure you never have to move a single thing on your own. Ethan's finger moved down the dials. The pressure system's set wrong too. It's been keeping your legs in a way that... He stopped himself, chose his words. Muscles you don't use, you lose. This chair's been making sure you don't use them, for 3 years. The room was completely silent. And this? Ethan tapped the last dial. The rehab program. The one built to rebuild your strength, the whole reason this specific chair costs what it costs. It's been set to 0, turned all the way off. Then the cable was pulled just in case, so even if somebody switched it back on, nothing would happen. He sat back and looked at her. Ms. Whitmore, I've fixed a lot of these chairs. I have never once seen one configured like this. This isn't a malfunction. Somebody sat here with a screwdriver and did this on purpose. You're saying... I'm saying the problem isn't your legs. The words landed in the room like a stone, dropped in still water. Victoria Whitmore stared at him. Her lips moved, but nothing came out. 3 years. 3 years of being... It was permanent. 3 years of being told it was in her head. 3 years of learning to be smaller than she was. And this man, this repairman in dirty boots, had knelt on her floor for 40 minutes and said the one thing not a single doctor had ever said. Get out, she whispered. Ms. Whitmore, get out. Her voice broke into a shout, ragged, furious. How dare you? How dare you come into my home, and do you think you're the first? Do you think you're the first person to look me in the eye and tell me there's a miracle I've been too stupid to see? I have heard it, Mr. Carter. From faith healers and con men and my own sister. And every single time I let myself believe it just for a second, and every single time it destroyed me a little more. She was gripping the armrests so hard, her knuckles had gone white. So no, I will not sit here and let a stranger sell me hope out of a toolbox. Get out of my house. Ethan didn't move. He didn't get up. He didn't argue. He just looked at her steady, the way you'd look at somebody standing on a ledge. I'm not selling you anything, he said quietly. I don't want your money for the hope. I'll charge you for the repair same as anybody, and that's it. He held up the little black bolt he'd taken out of the leg support. But this is real. I can put it in your hand and you can feel it. Somebody changed your chair so you'd stay weak. I don't know who and I don't know why. But I know I'm right because metal doesn't lie, Ms. Whitmore, and I have spent 30 years listening to it. He set the bolt down on the arm of her chair, right where she could see it. You don't have to believe me, he said. But I'd be lying if I walked out of here and told you I found nothing. And I've done enough lying for one lifetime. He stood up, gathered his tools, and turned to go. Wait. He stopped. Victoria was staring at the bolt. She picked it up with 2 fingers, turned it over. Such a small thing. Such a small, stupid, ordinary thing. Who? She said, and her voice had changed, the fury drained out of it, and underneath was something raw. Who would do this? That, Ethan said, is a whole lot bigger than a wheelchair, and it's not really my line of work. But you think someone did? I don't think, ma'am. I found it. He nodded at the bolt in her hand. That's not an opinion. That's evidence. Diane drove him back to the gate because Victoria had asked to be left alone, and neither of them had wanted to argue with her. You have to understand what you just did in there, Diane said. I fixed a chair. You didn't fix a chair. You told a woman who spent 3 years accepting she'll never walk that everyone lied to her. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? I know exactly what it does, Ethan said. It makes him furious, because it means all that giving up was for nothing. He looked out the window at the trees rolling by. I'd rather be furious than fooled. Wouldn't you? Diane didn't answer for a moment. Then softer than before. Who do you think did it? I don't know. But somebody paid for that chair, and somebody hired the tech who set it up, and somebody's been signing off on "nothing's wrong here" for 3 years. Follow the money, and the signatures, you'll find your man. Ethan glanced at her. You work here. You'd know that better than me. Diane's hands tightened on the wheel. There are things about this house, she said carefully, that I've wondered about for a long time. Like what? But they were at the gate, and Diane put the car in park, and whatever she'd been about to say, she swallowed it. Thank you for coming, Mr. Carter. Send us your invoice. Ethan got out, climbed into his pickup, and sat there for a second, with his hands on the wheel. He should just go home. It was a strange rich woman's problem, and he had a daughter to pick up in 4 hours, and an alternator to finish, and a stack of bills on the kitchen counter. It wasn't his business. He'd found the thing, said the thing, and now the smart move was to drive away and let the rich people sort out their rich people problems. He started the engine, and then he thought about the look on her face. 3 years of being told it was permanent, and it wasn't. 3 years of somebody, some specific human being with a specific face and a specific reason, deciding that Victoria Whitmore should stay in that chair. He'd seen that look before, not on a stranger. In the mirror in the months after Sarah died, when the doctors told him there was nothing more they could do, and he'd had to decide whether to believe them. Metal doesn't lie, he thought. But people do. All the time. And usually to the ones who can least afford to catch them at it. Ethan Carter put the truck in reverse, then stopped, then put it back in park. He pulled out his phone and called Diane. Mr. Carter, that control module, he said. The one with all the settings. It keeps a log. Every time somebody changes a setting, it records it. The change, the date, sometimes even the device it was made from. It's a service record. Chairs like that, they all have it. A pause. You didn't check it. I ran out of time, and honestly I didn't want to. Because if I'm right about what's on it, then this stops being about a chair and it starts being about a crime. And I wanted to give Ms. Whitmore the chance to walk away from that if she wanted to. Ethan looked up at the iron gate. But if she wants to know who did this to her, that log will have his name on it, or close enough to find him. The line was quiet for a long moment. I'll ask her, Diane said. She called back 40 minutes later, while Ethan was sitting in the school pickup line with the radio low. She wants you to come back. When? Now, today, she said. Diane hesitated. She said to tell you she's sorry she threw you out. And she said to tell you she doesn't want the hope. She wants the name. Ethan watched the school doors open, kids pouring out into the afternoon. Somewhere in that crowd was Lily. I've got my daughter, he said. I can't leave her. Bring her to the estate, Miss Whitmore said. And here Diane's voice did something complicated, something almost like disbelief. She said, a house that big should have at least one person in it who isn't afraid of her. Bring the girl. So that afternoon, Ethan Carter drove back up the ridge with an 8-year-old in the passenger seat asking approximately 900 questions. Is she rich? Real rich? Like a princess? Like a boss? She built a big company. Is she nice? Ethan thought about it. She's honest, he said finally. That's better than nice usually. You can trust an honest person even when they're mad at you. Lily considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. Is she mad at you? She was. I think we worked it out. They pulled up to the house, and this time Victoria was waiting for them in the front hall, and Ethan watched her face change the moment she saw Lily. Something in it softened, cracked open, went somewhere it hadn't been in a long time. Hello, Lily said, walking right up to the wheelchair without an ounce of the hesitation the adults all had. I'm Lily. Your chair is really cool. Does it go fast? Victoria blinked. It goes reasonably fast, yes. My dad fixes stuff. He fixed my bike and it was way broken. Lily leaned in confidentially. He can fix anything. Can he? Victoria said softly, and she looked up at Ethan over the child's head, and for a second there was something in her eyes he couldn't quite name. You know, I'm starting to wonder if he can. They set Lily up in the kitchen with a snack and a coloring book Diane produced from somewhere, and then Ethan and Victoria went back to the study, and he opened the control module and connected his laptop to the service port. You should know, he said, as the software loaded. Once I pull this log, we can't unknow what's on it. You said you want the name. I believe you. But I want you to be sure. Victoria's jaw was set. For 3 years, Mr. Carter, I have been the most powerful person in every room I entered, and also the most helpless. Do you understand what that does to a mind? I signed off on hundreds of millions of dollars in decisions from this chair, and I couldn't get myself a glass of water from the top shelf. Everyone treated me like I was made of glass, and everyone treated me like I was already gone. Her voice was steady now, hard as the frame of the chair. If someone did this to me on purpose, I don't want to be protected from it. I've had enough protecting. Pull the log. Ethan pulled the log. The screen filled with lines. Dates, times, setting changes, device identifiers. He scrolled to the beginning. 3 years ago. The initial configuration. Everything set the way it should be. The rehab program active. The assist calibrated correctly for a patient with an incomplete injury and a real shot at recovery. Then 6 weeks later, a series of changes. Ethan read them and felt his stomach turn over. What? Victoria said. What is it? 6 weeks after your accident, Ethan said slowly. Somebody reconfigured this chair, all at once. Same session. Rehab program disabled. Assist maxed out. Pressure system altered. Everything I found this morning, it all happened in one sitting on one date. He looked up at her. You remember what was happening 6 weeks after your accident? Victoria's face had gone pale. I'd just come home from the rehabilitation facility. I was starting outpatient therapy. She stopped. There was a board meeting, the first one I attended remotely from here. about whether the company should accept an acquisition offer. An offer to buy the company. A hostile one. I refused it. I told the board that Whitmore Technologies was not for sale and that I intended to return to full duties as soon as I was able. Her hands had begun to tremble. That was the meeting. That was the week. Ethan looked back at the screen. It logs the device that made the changes. Give me a second. He scrolled, squinted, cross-referenced. There was an identifier attached to the reconfiguration session, a device, a login, a technician credential. He read it. He read it again. And Ethan Carter, who did not rattle easy, who had kept his voice level through the worst days of his life, felt something cold settle into his chest. Ms. Whitmore, he said. Who's Marcus? The color left her face entirely. Marcus Hale, she whispered. My business partner. He was my closest friend. We built the company together. He's the one who's been running it while I recovered. He's the one who... She stopped, swallowed. Why? Why are you asking me about Marcus? Ethan turned the laptop around so she could see the screen. Because the changes to your chair, he said, were authorized under his credential. 6 weeks after your accident. The same week you refused to sell the company he's now running. He held her gaze. I told you this morning I didn't know who did it or why. I still don't know why for sure. But there's his name, Ms. Whitmore, right there in the metal. And metal doesn't lie. For a long, long moment, Victoria Whitmore did not move. She stared at the screen at the name of the man she'd trusted more than anyone alive. The man who'd held her hand in the hospital, who'd wept at her bedside, who'd promised he would take care of everything while she healed. And then very quietly, she began to laugh, a terrible broken sound, with no humor in it at all. He came to see me, she said. Every week, for 3 years. He sat in that chair right there, that one Mr. Carter, and he told me how sorry he was. He told me the doctors were doing everything they could. He told me not to push too hard, that my health was all that mattered, that the company could wait, that I should rest. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she didn't wipe it away. He told me to rest, while he was... She couldn't finish. Ethan closed the laptop. He didn't say it's going to be okay, because Diane had told him not to, and because it wasn't true yet. He didn't say he understood, because you never really understood another person's particular hell. Instead, he pulled a chair over and sat down in front of her, close at eye level. Look at me, he said. She looked at him. You were never broken, Ethan Carter said. You hear me? Not your legs, not your mind, none of it. Somebody spent 3 years and a whole lot of money convincing you that you were, because a broken Victoria Whitmore was worth more to him than a whole one. That's not weakness, ma'am. That's not you giving up. That's a con. A long, cruel, patient con, and you got caught in it same as anybody would've. He tapped the black box between them. But the con's over now, because I found the wire, and once you find the wire you can put it back. Victoria wiped her face with the back of her hand, the first time Ethan had seen her allow herself a plain human gesture since he'd walked in that morning. Put it back, she repeated. The rehab system. Everything they shut off. Ethan's voice was quiet and certain. I can turn it back on today. Right now. It won't be a miracle. It'll be hard, and it'll hurt, and it'll take longer than you want, and it might not go as far as you hope. I won't lie to you about that. But 3 years ago, somebody decided you'd never move again, and they were wrong, and they knew they were wrong, and they did it anyway. He held out his hand, palm up, the little black bolt sitting in the center of it. So the only question left is whether you want to prove 'em wrong back. Victoria Whitmore looked at the bolt in the repairman's rough, scarred hand. From the kitchen came the sound of Lily laughing at something bright and careless and alive. And for the first time in 3 years, in the great silent house on the ridge, Victoria reached out, not with resignation, not with grief, but with the first spark of something she had almost forgotten she was capable of, and closed her fingers around it. Turn it back on, she said. The rehab system came back to life with a soft electronic chime, and Victoria Whitmore flinched at the sound like it was a gunshot. That's it, she said. That's the noise. 3 years of my life, and it comes back with a little beep. Machines don't know how to be dramatic, Ethan said, watching the diagnostic run across his laptop. That's a people thing. I was watching the numbers scroll, and what he saw made his jaw tighten. The system was reporting 3 years of stored data. 3 years of a rehabilitation program that had never once been allowed to run. Every session, it should have logged. Every exercise, it should have prompted. All of it sitting there blank like a road that had been paved and then blocked off before a single car could drive on it. "How bad?" Victoria said, watching his face. "Don't soften it. How bad is it? You want the truth or the comfortable version?" "I've had 3 years of the comfortable version, Mr. Carter. It's why I'm still sitting down." Ethan turned the laptop toward her. "Your muscles haven't been used the way they should have been. 3 years of a machine doing everything for you. That's real, and we can't pretend it away. But here's what they lied to you about." He pointed at a line on the screen. "The nerve response tests. These are baseline readings the chair takes automatically every time you sit in it. You've got signal below the waist. Weak, buried, tangled up, but it's there. It's been there this whole time. A complete injury doesn't show this. Yours does." Victoria stared at the screen. The doctor said what somebody paid them to say, or what somebody handed them to read." Ethan closed the laptop gently. "I'm not calling every one of them a crook. Most doctors are honest people doing hard work. But when the same man who's stealing your company also controls who's in the room examining you and what chair you're sitting in and what records they're looking at, you stop getting the truth. You start getting the version that keeps you quiet." He watched her absorb it. He'd seen people take bad news 100 ways, crying, screaming, going silent, going numb. He'd never quite seen what Victoria Whitmore did, which was to go very still and very cold, like a machine recalibrating. 3 years, she said again. "Marcus visited me every single week for 3 years. I know. He brought me flowers. He read me the quarterly reports. He held my hand and told me the doctors said I needed patience." Her voice didn't shake now. That was the frightening part. It had gone flat and level, and Ethan understood suddenly why people were afraid of this woman. He sat there and watched me learn to be helpless, and he called it caring for me. "Victoria, when do we start?" "What?" "The rehabilitation, the real one, the one he turned off." She looked at him, and her eyes were dry now and burning. "When do we start?" Ethan set the laptop aside. "It's not that simple. You need a real medical team behind this. People you trust. And right now, I don't know who in your life you can trust, because I just found out your best friend's been poisoning the well for 3 years. So before we start anything, we need to figure out who's clean and who's not." "Diane's clean." "You sure?" "She tried to warn you in the car, on the way to the gate." Victoria almost smiled. "You think I don't hear about everything that happens in my own house? Diane has been trying to tell me something was wrong for 2 years. I told her to stop. I told her she was imagining things. I told her—" She stopped. God help me, I defended him. Every time she raised a concern, I defended Marcus. Right then, as if summoned. Diane appeared in the doorway with Lily's hand in hers. The little girl had a blue marker on her fingers and a grin on her face. "She colored a dinosaur," Diane announced. "A very anatomically confusing dinosaur." "It's a dino shark," Lily corrected. "It swims and it stomps." Ethan felt the tension in the room crack just a little, and he was grateful for it. "Course it does, best of both." But Victoria was looking at Diane differently now. "Diane, come here a moment." Diane came, and Victoria reached out and took the older woman's hand, which Ethan got the sense had not happened in a very long time, because Diane's whole face changed. "You tried to tell me," Victoria said. "About Marcus, 2 years ago. I told you to mind your place." Diane went carefully still. "Ms. Whitmore, I owe you an apology. I don't have time to give properly, so this will have to do. You were right, and I was too proud and too frightened to hear it." Victoria squeezed her hand. "I need you now, more than I've ever needed anyone. Are you with me?" For a second, Ethan thought the composed professional Diane Foss might actually break down. She didn't, but it cost her something. "I've been with you for 11 years, Diane said. "I'm not going anywhere." "Good, because I'm going to need you to lie for me. Diane blinked. I'm sorry. Marcus can't know. Victoria's mind was moving now, and Ethan could see it, the entrepreneur coming back to life behind her eyes, the strategist who'd built a company from nothing. If Marcus finds out that we know, he'll move faster. He'll finalize whatever he's been building toward, and he'll do it before I can stop him. So as far as anyone outside this room is concerned, nothing has changed. I am the same broken woman he visits every Thursday. I am still resting. I am still patient. Her jaw set. And I am still going to be sitting in this chair when he walks in next week, where he left me. Ethan felt a slow chill go up his spine because he understood what she was proposing. You want to hide the recovery. I want to hide everything. The chair, the rehab, all of it. Marcus thinks he's won. Let him keep thinking it. Every week he'll come and sit with the helpless woman he made, and every hour he's not looking will be undoing what he did. She looked at Ethan. Can we do that? Can we run the rehabilitation in secret? The equipment's built into the chair. Nobody has to know it's running but you. Ethan hesitated. But that means you're going to sit in front of the man who did this to you week after week and smile at him and pretend. That's not easy, Victoria. That takes a kind of cold most people don't have. Victoria Whitmore looked at the little black bolt still sitting on the arm of her chair, the one that had held her prisoner for 3 years. You have no idea, she said softly, what I'm capable of when I'm not busy feeling sorry for myself. Lily, who had been listening with the frank attention children give to conversations they're not supposed to understand, tugged on Ethan's sleeve. Dad, is the lady a spy now? Ethan looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at Lily. And for the first time all day, something genuinely warm moved across the woman's sharp face. Yes, Victoria told the child. I suppose I am. They started that night. Ethan couldn't stay. He had Lily, and there were limits to how long a repairman could reasonably be at a client's estate. But before he left, he set up the rehab program with a schedule, wrote out instructions. Diane could follow, and showed Victoria how to run the actuators through their range of motion. The first session lasted 11 minutes. It should have lasted 40. Victoria's muscles, unused for 3 years, screamed after the first few cycles, and her legs, which she had been told for 3 years, could feel nothing, felt everything. She gasped. Tears came without permission. Diane hovered terrified, ready to shut it all down. Stop, Diane said. This is too much. Look at her, Mr. Carter, she's in pain. It's supposed to hurt, Ethan said quietly, though it was killing him to say it, watching this proud woman fight her own body. Pain means the nerves are talking. Pain means there's something there to feel. It's when it's numb that you worry. He knelt down. Victoria, you want me to stop it? Through gritted teeth, sweat on her brow, Victoria Whitmore said the only thing she was ever going to say. Marcus, she breathed, thinks I'm resting. Turn it up. They did 4 minutes more. When it was done, Victoria collapsed back into the chair, drenched and shaking, and Ethan noticed smiling. It was a terrible smile, all teeth, but it was the smile of a fighter who just landed the first punch after 3 years of taking them. Same time tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow's Saturday. I've got Lily. Bring her. She likes the kitchen. Victoria caught his eye. And Mr. Carter, I'll pay you. Properly. For all of it. Your time, your discretion, whatever this becomes. Name your rate. Ethan wiped his hands on his rag and thought about the stack of bills on his counter. He thought about Lily's school shoes with the hole in the toe. He thought about all the reasons a smart man would take the money and be grateful. I'll charge you for the repairs, he said. I did work, you pay for work, but not for the rest of it. Why not? He looked at her for a long moment. Because somebody once told me my wife had 3 months and there was nothing to be done, and I believed them, Ethan said. And I've spent 4 years wondering if I gave up too easy. If I'd looked harder. If somebody like me had knelt down and checked everything the way I check everything. His voice roughened. I don't get to fix that. She's gone. But I get to fix this. And I'm not going to put a price tag on the one thing that's making me feel like a man again. That's my reason. It's mine, and I'm keeping it, and you can respect it, or you can find another repairman. The study was silent. Even Lily in the doorway had gone quiet. Victoria Whitmore, who was worth more money than Ethan Carter would see in 100 lifetimes, looked at him like he'd handed her something she couldn't buy. "I'll respect it," she said quietly. The weeks that followed moved fast. Every day. Ethan came up the ridge sometimes with Lily, sometimes alone, when he could get a neighbor to watch her. Every day, the sessions got a little longer, a little harder. 11 minutes became 20. 20 became 35. And the machine which never lied showed Ethan numbers that made the hair stand up on his arms. Nerve response, climbing muscle activation, returning signal that had been buried for 3 years, starting to fight its way back to the surface. But it was slow. God, it was slow. And there were setbacks. There was the morning Victoria's legs seized so badly she couldn't finish and spent the whole session weeping in frustration, cursing Ethan, cursing Marcus, cursing her own body. There was the afternoon she made it through a full cycle and then couldn't do it again for 4 days. Ethan learned to read her like he read a machine, when to push, when to back off, when to just sit with her in silence and let the storm pass. And through it all, every Thursday Marcus Hale came. Ethan saw him only once from a distance, and it was enough. Marcus was tall, handsome, in an expensive way, silver-templed and warm-eyed. The kind of man who made you feel important, right up until you realized he was measuring you for something. He arrived with flowers. He greeted Diane by name. He went into the study and through the door. Ethan heard him. Heard the soft, caring voice, the gentle concern. "We mustn't overtax you, Vicky. Your recovery is all any of us wants." And Ethan had to walk out to the truck and grip the steering wheel until his knuckles went white, because he had never in his life wanted to hit a man so badly. Inside, Victoria smiled. She thanked Marcus for the flowers. She let him hold her hand. She asked in a small, tired voice about the company, and Marcus told her not to worry about it, that he was handling everything, that she should rest. And the moment his car cleared the gate, Victoria wheeled herself back to the study, and her voice came out like iron. "Diane, get the machine. I want to do a double session." "Victoria, he smells like the same cologne he wore to the hospital," Victoria said, and there was something in her voice that made Diane stop arguing. 3 years, get the machine." That was the night Ethan understood that Victoria Whitmore was not doing this to walk. Walking was just the scoreboard. She was doing it to survive the pretending, and the harder Marcus pretended to care, the harder she pushed. But secrets have weight, and pretending is a kind of poison, and one. Thursday, 6 weeks in, it almost came apart. Ethan was in the garage under the estate. Victoria had let him use it as a workshop since he was there so often when he heard raised voices from upstairs. Marcus's voice. And a second voice he didn't recognize. He came up the stairs quiet and stopped at the door of the study, which was open a crack. Marcus was there, and with him was a man in a suit Ethan didn't know, carrying a briefcase. And the warm, caring voice was gone. This was a different Marcus. "Not leaving here without her signature," the stranger was saying. "The board is losing patience, Marcus. You told us 3 months. It's been 3 years. If she won't sign the transfer of authority voluntarily, we move to have her declared incapacitated, and that's a mess I'd rather avoid." "She'll sign," Marcus said. "She trusts me. She just needs the right—" "She needs to understand her situation," the stranger cut in. "She's never walking again. The company can't run on a ghost. Make her see reason, or we do it the hard way. You have 2 weeks." Ethan's blood went cold. 2 weeks. He heard footsteps and pulled back from the door, just as Victoria's voice floated out soft and weak and utterly convincing. "Marcus, is someone here? I heard voices." And Marcus, warm again, in an instant oil poured over water. "Just business, Vicky. Nothing for you to worry about. You rest now. I'll come by Thursday." Ethan waited until the cars were gone. Then he went into the study, and he found Victoria sitting perfectly still, her face white, and he knew she'd heard every word. 2 weeks, she said. "I heard. They're going to declare me incapacitated. Take the company by force. Marcus will control everything." Her hands were trembling. "I'm not ready, Ethan. I can move my legs a little. I can stand for a few seconds if I'm holding something. But I can't walk. I can't stand up in a boardroom and prove I'm competent in 2 weeks. It's not enough time. The rehabilitation needs months. You told me yourself. Ethan sat down across from her. His mind was racing, but not the way hers was. Hers was spiraling into despair. His was doing the thing it did with a broken engine, narrowing, focusing, looking for the one part that mattered. You're thinking about it wrong, he said. Excuse me. You're thinking you have to walk into that boardroom to win. You don't. Ethan leaned forward. Victoria, they don't want to declare you incapacitated because you can't walk. Walking's got nothing to do with running a company. They want to declare you incapacitated because they've spent 3 years building a story that your mind went with your body, that you're fragile, broken, gone. He tapped the arm of her chair. The wheelchair was never really about your legs. It was about the story. Marcus needed everyone, the board, the doctors, you, to believe you were finished. And the chair was the proof he pointed to. See, she can't even walk. Of course she can't lead. Victoria was staring at him. So we don't beat him by walking, Ethan said. We beat him by breaking the story, and the story breaks the second one person with authority looks at those medical records and sees what I saw. An incomplete injury. Signal below the waist. A rehabilitation program that was deliberately shut off 6 weeks after your accident under Marcus Hale's own credential. He held her gaze. You don't need to stand up in that boardroom, Victoria. You need to bring the receipts. And I've been collecting them for 6 weeks. Slowly, the panic drained out of Victoria's face, and the strategist came back. The service log, she said. The service log. The nerve readings. Every session I've documented, timestamped, showing measurable recovery that was possible the whole time, and that somebody stole from you on purpose. Ethan's voice was quiet and hard. Marcus built his whole case on you being hopeless. The second we prove you weren't, his case doesn't just weaken. It flips. Because now the question isn't why can't she lead? It's why did her business partner sabotage her medical equipment the same week she refused to sell him the company? Victoria's breath caught. That's motive. That's motive means, and a paper trail with his name on it. Ethan sat back. You don't need a doctor to walk you into that room. You need a lawyer, a good one Marcus doesn't own. I have one. Victoria's eyes had come alive. Catherine Reyes. She's handled my personal affairs for 15 years. Marcus has never liked her, which is precisely why I trust her. She was already reaching for the phone on her chair. But Ethan, if we do this, if we bring this to a lawyer, there's no more pretending. Marcus will know we know. The whole game changes. The game already changed, Ethan said. The second that man in the suit said 2 weeks. You don't have the luxury of the long, slow recovery anymore. He forced the timeline, so we force it back. Victoria looked at the phone in her hand. Then she looked at Ethan. And something passed between them. Something that had been building for 6 weeks over pain and sweat and stolen sessions, and the shared secret of a woman learning to move again in the dark. Why are you doing this? She said. Really? And don't give me the answer about your wife. That's part of it, I believe you, but it's not all of it. You could have documented the sabotage and handed it to the police weeks ago and been done. Why are you still here? Why do you come up this ridge every single day for a woman who screamed at you the first time she met you? Ethan was quiet for a moment. Because the first day I met you, he said slowly, you were the most alone person I'd ever seen. Big house, all that money, all those people around you, and every single one of them had decided you were already gone. They talked about you like you were furniture, and you'd started to believe them. He looked at his hands. I know what that's like. After Sarah died, I disappeared. Not all at once. Bit by bit. Stopped answering calls. Stopped fixing anything that mattered. I was a ghost in my own house, and the only thing that kept me here was a little girl who needed her breakfast. He looked up. Then I came up here and found somebody more lost than me. And it turned out that pulling you back was the thing that pulled me back. So I don't know how to explain it better than that. Fixing you is fixing me, and I'm not done yet. The study was very quiet. Victoria Whitmore, who had heard 10,000 pitches and 1,000 lies and could smell an angle from across a boardroom, looked at this man and found to her genuine astonishment that she believed every word. Call Catherine, Ethan said gently. Let's break the story. She called Catherine. The lawyer arrived within the hour, a small, ferociously composed woman who took one look at the service logs on Ethan's laptop. One look at the nerve readings. One look at Marcus Hale's credential stamped on the sabotage and set down her coffee very carefully. "Victoria," Catherine said, "do you understand what this is? Tell me. This isn't a business dispute. This isn't a hostile takeover." Catherine's voice was steel. "Tampering with a person's medical equipment to prevent their recovery in furtherance of seizing control of their assets. That's not a lawsuit, Victoria. That's a crime. Several crimes. This man didn't just try to steal your company." She looked up. "He tried to keep you disabled. On purpose. For profit. And he's been in this house every week for 3 years to make sure it stuck." "I know," Victoria said quietly. "There's more." Ethan spoke up. "The 2 weeks. Marcus and some board member were here today. They're moving to have Victoria declared incapacitated. If they file that before we file this, it gets ugly. He'll say we fabricated the evidence to fight the incapacitation ruling. He'll say the repairman's a fraud she hired to make up a story." Catherine's eyes sharpened. "He's right that timing matters. Whoever files first controls the narrative." She stood pacing now. "We need this airtight before he catches wind. Independent verification of the medical readings a doctor he doesn't own. Forensic authentication of the service logs so no one can claim we altered them. And we need to move before his 2-week window closes." She stopped. "Victoria, this is going to become very public and very ugly very fast. Marcus will not go quietly. He'll come after your reputation, your competence, this man's credibility, all of it. Are you prepared for that?" And here Victoria Whitmore did something that made Ethan's chest ache. She put her hands on the armrests of the chair that had held her prisoner for 3 years. And slowly trembling teeth gritted, drawing on 6 weeks of secret work and 3 years of buried fury. She pushed herself up. She stood. Not for long. Not steadily. Her legs shook, and Diane started forward, and Ethan half rose to catch her. But for 4 full seconds, Victoria Whitmore stood on her own 2 feet in the middle of her study, and she looked her lawyer dead in the eye. "I've been sitting down for 3 years," Victoria said, breathing hard, "because a man I trusted decided I should. I am finished sitting down." She lowered herself back into the chair, spent shaking and utterly transformed. "File it, Catherine. All of it. Let him come after me. Let him try. He built his whole plan on me being helpless." Her eyes found Ethan's across the room. He forgot to check whether it was still true. Catherine gathered the laptop, the logs, the readings, everything. "I'll need 3 days to make it airtight. Say nothing to anyone, especially Marcus." "Thursday," Victoria said suddenly. "What? Marcus comes Thursday. That's in 3 days." A slow, cold, magnificent smile spread across her face. "Let him come. Let him bring his flowers and his cologne and his gentle little voice telling me to rest. Let him sit in that chair one last time and think he's won." She looked at Ethan and at Diane and at the lawyer. "And then Catherine files the moment he walks out my door. So the last thing that man ever does as a free and trusted friend is lie to my face one final time, and he'll never even know it was the end." Diane exhaled slowly. Catherine almost smiled. And Ethan Carter, the single dad repairman who fixed the things everyone else gave up on, looked at the woman he'd found alone and hopeless 6 weeks ago, now sitting in her chair like a general at the head of an army, and understood that he had not repaired Victoria Whitmore at all. He'd just turned her back on. Lily wandered in from the kitchen, blue marker on her nose, holding up her drawing. "I made another dino shark," she announced to the room full of grim, plotting adults. "This one has a briefcase. He's a business dino shark." And Victoria Whitmore threw back her head and laughed a real laugh, full and unguarded. The first one in 3 years, and reached out her hand to the little girl and said, "Bring him here. I think I know exactly the meeting he belongs in." Catherine needed 3 days, and the 3 days nearly broke all of them. The first thing that went wrong on Tuesday morning when Catherine called Ethan directly instead of Victoria, which told him before she said a word that something was off. "The doctor fell through," Catherine said. "The independent one I lined up to verify the nerve readings. He backed out an hour ago. Said he had a scheduling conflict, but the man doesn't have scheduling conflicts, Mr. Carter. Somebody got to him. Ethan set down his coffee. Marcus, I can't prove it, but Whitmore Technologies has relationships with half the medical establishment in this state. Marcus has spent 3 years making sure the right people owe him favors. Every credible specialist I approach, I have to wonder whether I'm walking Victoria's secret straight into his hands. Catherine's voice was tight. We need a doctor he can't touch, and I don't know where to find one who's both credible and clean on this kind of timeline. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then something occurred to him. What about somebody who's not local? Somebody with no connection to this state, no favors owed, no reason to care who Marcus Hale is. I'd love one. Do you have a rehabilitation specialist in your back pocket, Mr. Carter? And Ethan, who had spent 15 years as a mechanical engineer designing medical devices before he ever picked up a repairman's toolbox, said slowly, I might. There was a woman I worked with years back, Dr. Anna Petrov. We designed a spinal rehabilitation rig together for a research hospital. She's the real thing, published, respected, and the last I heard she'd moved clear across the country to run a clinic. She wouldn't know Marcus Hale from a hole in the ground. He rubbed his jaw. And she owes me. I caught a design flaw in that rig that would have hurt people. She never forgot it. Can you reach her? I can try. He tried. And here was the first small miracle of those 3 days. Anna Petrov remembered him, and when Ethan explained what he'd found inside Victoria Whitmore's wheelchair, the disabled rehab program, the maxed assist, the 3 years of stolen recovery. The line went silent for a long moment, and then Dr. Petrov said in a voice gone cold and professional, Send me the readings, all of them. Raw data, not your summary. If what you're describing is real, Ethan, then somebody committed medical fraud, and I will fly out there myself to say so under oath. The readings went out that afternoon, and that should have been the good news, except that Tuesday evening brought the second thing that went wrong, and it was worse. Ethan was up at the estate running the evening session when Diane came into the study with her face gray and her phone in her hand. Marcus moved his visit, Diane said. Victoria mid-session and sweating went rigid. What? His office just called to confirm. He's not coming Thursday. He's coming tomorrow, Wednesday, morning. Diane's hands were shaking. And he's not coming alone. They said he's bringing a physician for a routine assessment. Victoria, he's bringing a doctor, his doctor, to examine you. The room went dead silent, except for the soft hum of the rehab actuators. Ethan understood instantly what it meant, and he saw Victoria understand it a half-second later. Marcus wasn't coming for a friendly visit. Marcus was coming to build his case. A physician's assessment, his physician declaring Victoria unfit, unresponsive, unchanged. The final piece of paper he needed before moving to have her declared incapacitated. He'd moved the timeline up because the board was breathing down his neck, and he had no idea at all that the woman he was coming to declare hopeless had been standing up in this very room 3 days ago. He can't examine me, Victoria said. If his doctor examines me and finds muscle response, finds that I can move, the whole secret collapses. He'll know. He'll know I've been recovering, and he'll know someone helped me, and he'll bury the evidence and finish the takeover before Catherine can file. Then he doesn't find it, Ethan said. Victoria stopped. What? You've spent 6 weeks hiding your recovery from this man. You want to tell me you can't hide it for one more morning? Ethan killed the actuators and knelt in front of her. His doctor's coming to confirm what Marcus already believes, that you're helpless. People find what they expect to find, Victoria, especially when they're being paid to find it. So you give him exactly what he expects. You be the broken woman one last time. You let his doctor poke you and prod you and write down, no change, no hope, no function. And you let Marcus walk out of here absolutely certain he's won. And then his own doctor's report becomes the best evidence we've got. A grim smile touched Ethan's mouth. Because when Catherine files, and Dr. Petrov testifies that you had measurable documented recovery this whole time, Marcus's doctor is on record saying you had none. Either his doctor is incompetent, or his doctor is lying, or his doctor never actually examined you properly. All three make Marcus look like a man who's been manufacturing a false diagnosis. He's not just walking into your house tomorrow, Victoria. He's walking into a trap and signing the paperwork himself. Slowly, the fear left Victoria's face, and the strategist came back, and with it came something that was almost delight. "You want me to let him win," she said, "so that his winning becomes the proof." "I want you to lose one last battle," Ethan said, "so you can win the war." But Diane was still standing there with the gray face, and now she spoke quietly. "There's a problem. Your legs, Victoria. The muscle tone. 3 years ago, you had none. Now you have some, not much, but some. A good doctor doing a real examination might notice the difference. The atrophy isn't as severe as it should be. If he's actually competent." "He won't be competent," Victoria said suddenly. "That's the thing about Marcus. He doesn't hire competent. He hires loyal. Whatever doctor he's bringing is a man on his payroll who's going to write down exactly what Marcus tells him to write down. He's not coming here to examine me. He's coming here to sign a form." She looked at Ethan, and the delight was full-blown now, cold and brilliant. "Marcus has spent 3 years surrounding me with people who tell him what he wants to hear. And tomorrow, that's going to be the thing that destroys him." They prepared through the night. Ethan reset the chair to its old configuration. Assist maxed rehab disabled everything exactly as Marcus had left it, so that if anyone checked the settings, they'd find them undisturbed. It cost him something to do it, to put the prison back together even for a day, and Victoria watched him do it with her jaw tight. "It feels like giving up," she admitted quietly, sitting back down in it, even pretending. "It's not giving up. It's a punch you take on purpose, so the other guy drops his guard." Ethan tightened the last panel. "My daddy used to box. He told me the smartest thing a fighter can do is let the other man think he's winning, right up until he isn't." Wednesday morning, 10 o'clock, Marcus Hale arrived. Ethan wasn't in the room, couldn't be a repairman, had no business at a medical assessment, and his presence would have raised exactly the questions they needed to avoid. But he was in the garage below, and Diane had left a door cracked, and he heard most of it. He heard Marcus's warm voice filling the study. He heard the flowers being set down. He heard a second man, older, with the flat, bored tone of someone going through motions, introduce himself as Dr. Bell. And he heard Victoria Whitmore give the performance of her life. She was magnificent. She was small and tired and hopeless. Her voice trembled at the right moments. When Dr. Bell tested her legs, she let them lie limp and unresponsive. 3 years of learned helplessness turned into a weapon. And Ethan, who knew now, who had watched her stand, could hardly believe the woman he was hearing was the same one who'd pushed herself up off that chair 3 days before. "No meaningful change," Dr. Bell pronounced. "Consistent with a complete injury. I'd expect no further recovery at this stage." "You're certain, doctor?" Marcus gentle, grieving. "I only want what's best for her. If there were any hope at all." "There isn't. I'm sorry, Marcus. She's fortunate to have a friend like you looking after her." And Ethan down in the garage closed his eyes because he could hear the smile in Marcus Hale's voice when the man replied, "She's family. I'll always take care of her." He heard Victoria thank them in a small broken voice for coming. He heard her ask Marcus so gently whether the company was doing all right without her. He heard Marcus reassure her that everything was handled, that she mustn't worry, that all she needed to do was rest. And then he heard the cars leave. Ethan came up the stairs 2 at a time. He found Victoria sitting exactly where they'd left her, still in the ruined configuration of the chair, and for a terrible second, he thought the performance had cost her too much, that she'd shattered under the weight of it. Then she looked up, and her eyes were blazing. "Did you get it?" she said. "Diane, the recording. The camera. Did we get it?" Diane held up her phone with a hand that wasn't quite steady. Every word. His doctor on tape saying no recovery is possible. Marcus on tape saying he only wants what's best for you. A thin, fierce smile. And Marcus on tape telling his doctor when he thought you couldn't hear, "Just sign it, Bell, the board needs it by Friday." The study went silent. "He said that," Victoria breathed. "He said that, clear as day, while you were pretending to look at the flowers." Diane's voice cracked with something between fury and triumph. Just sign it, the board needs it by Friday. He told his own doctor to falsify the assessment, and he said it out loud in your house, because he has spent 3 years being so certain you were nothing that he stopped being careful. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. That's it. That's the whole thing. That's not circumstantial anymore. That's him in his own words directing a doctor to lie about your condition. He turned to Victoria. Call Catherine. We don't need 3 days. We've got everything. But Victoria was already reaching for the phone, and her hand was steady now, and when Catherine answered, the woman who spoke into that phone was not a patient or a victim or a broken thing in a chair. She was Victoria Whitmore, who had built a billion-dollar company from nothing, and she had just watched her enemy hand her the knife. Catherine, she said. Change of plan. Marcus came today, not Thursday. He brought a doctor to falsify a medical assessment, and we have it on tape, including him instructing the doctor to lie. A pause. Yes, I said on tape. Another pause, and then Victoria's face did something Ethan would remember for the rest of his life. It went for just a moment soft and almost wondering before the steel came back. So here's what we're going to do. We're not going to wait for him to file. We're going to file first. Tomorrow morning. And Catherine, I want to be there when it happens. I want to be in that room. Ethan frowned. What room? Victoria hung up and looked at him. The board meeting, she said. There's a board meeting Friday. The one Marcus mentioned, the board needs it by Friday. That's when he plans to present Dr. Bell's assessment and move to have me declared incapacitated. The whole board will be there. Every executive. Every person who spent 3 years believing I was gone. Her eyes glittered. I'm going to be there too. Victoria. Marcus is going to walk into that boardroom Friday to bury me, she said, and her voice was rising now, 3 years of banked fury finally finding air. He's going to present his doctor's report. He's going to tell them all in that warm, caring voice that poor Victoria will never recover, that it's time to move on, that he'll shoulder the burden of leadership out of love. And they're going to believe him, because they always believe him. She gripped the armrests. And then the doors are going to open, and I'm going to be in them. The room was electric. In the chair, Diane asked quietly, and Victoria Whitmore paused. It was the question underneath everything, the one Ethan had been circling for 6 weeks without asking, because it wasn't his to ask. Could she walk in, not stand for 4 shaking seconds in a private study, propped and spotted and safe? Could she walk on her own through a set of boardroom doors in front of the very people who'd written her off with the man who'd sabotaged her, sitting at the head of the table? How long do I have? Victoria said. Until Friday. 2 days, Ethan said. You told me these things take months. They do. Can I walk into that room in 2 days, Ethan? Not stand. Walk. Through the doors to the table on my own. She looked at him with absolute directness. I need the truth, not the comfortable version. Can I do it? And Ethan Carter, who had promised her from the very first day that he would never lie to her, looked at the numbers he'd been watching. Climbed for 6 weeks and looked at the woman asking and told her the truth. 2 days ago, I'd have said no. He said it slowly. The muscles aren't there yet. The endurance isn't there. Physically, medically walking that far unassisted in 2 days should not be possible. He paused. But I've been fixing broken things for 30 years, Victoria, and I've learned there's 2 kinds of possible. There's what the machine can do, and there's what the person driving it can do. And those are not the same number, not even close. Meaning what? Meaning your legs can't do it. But I've watched you these 6 weeks, and I don't think your legs are what's going to walk you into that room. He held her gaze. So here's the honest answer. Maybe. If we push you harder than is safe. If you're willing to hurt in ways I can't promise won't do damage. If you want it more than your body wants to quit. He straightened. It's not a medical question anymore. It's a you question. And that one I can't answer. Only you can. The silence stretched. Lily, who had been napping on the study sofa through the whole quiet drama of the adults, stirred and sat up, rubbing her eyes' hair everywhere. Are we still doing the spy thing? She mumbled. And Victoria Whitmore looked at the little girl, and then at the girl's father, and then down at her own 2 legs, the legs a man she'd trusted had tried to steal from her. The legs 3 years of lies had tried to convince her were dead, and something settled in her face. Not hope exactly. Something harder and older and more dangerous than hope. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly. "We're still doing the spy thing. In fact, we're just getting to the good part." She turned to Ethan and her voice dropped and there was no fear in it at all. "Push me, as hard as you have to. I don't care if it hurts. I have spent 3 years being careful, and being careful is what nearly cost me everything." She set her jaw. "I am going to walk into that boardroom on Friday, and I am going to watch Marcus Hale's face when the woman he buried walks in through the door on her own 2 feet. Now set up the machine." The next 2 days did not exist for anyone in that house except as pain and repetition. Ethan pushed her. The way he'd never pushed anyone, the way he'd have been fired for pushing a patient if he'd still been in the medical device business. Session after session, hour after hour. Resistance cranked past every guideline. Rest periods cut to the bone. Victoria screamed. She wept. Twice her legs gave out completely, and she went down, and Ethan caught her and set her back up and said, "Keep going," in a voice that broke his own heart, and she kept going. Diane brought food no one ate, and water everyone forgot to drink. Dr. Petrov, monitoring the readings remotely from across the country, called twice to warn Ethan he was past every safe threshold. And both times Victoria took the phone and told the doctor through gritted teeth that she'd signed the waiver in her own mind days ago. And the numbers climbed. God, they climbed. Muscle activation. Ethan had thought would take 3 months of careful work came screaming up out of some reservoir of pure will he'd never seen in a human being before. By Thursday night, Victoria could stand for a full minute. She could take a step holding the parallel bars Ethan had rigged in the study. Then 2 steps. Then at 11 o'clock Thursday night, drenched in gray with exhaustion and shaking in every fiber. Victoria. Whitmore let go of the bars and took 4 steps across her own study, unassisted, and fell forward into Ethan Carter's arms. He caught her. He held her up. And for a moment, neither of them moved, this proud broken woman and this quiet broken man, holding each other up in the middle of the night, because it turned out that was the only way either of them had ever managed to stand. "I can't do the whole room," she whispered into his shoulder, spent past speech. 4 steps. That's all I have. The boardroom door to the table is 40 feet, Ethan. I have 4 steps. Ethan held her, and his mind did the thing it did, narrowing, focusing, finding the one part that mattered. "Then we don't need 40 feet, he said quietly. "We need 4 steps, and a table you can reach." He eased her back into the chair. "You walk in the door. You walk to the nearest chair at that table, 4 steps, 5 at most, and you put your hands on it, and you stand there. You don't need to walk the whole room, Victoria. You just need to walk in it, one time, where they can all see. The 4 steps are the whole story." Victoria, exhausted beyond exhaustion, started to laugh, weak and wondering. "You really do fix everything," she said. "No," Ethan said. "You fix this one. I just held the bars." Friday came. Catherine had filed at 8 that morning, the whole package, the service logs. Dr. Petrov's sworn statement, the recording of Marcus instructing Dr. Bell to falsify the assessment, all of it delivered simultaneously to the court, to the full board of Whitmore Technologies, and to the office of the district attorney. By 9, the story was already moving through channels Marcus couldn't control. But the board didn't know that yet. The board only knew there was a 10 o'clock meeting called by Marcus Hale to address the difficult question of Victoria Whitmore's future. Ethan drove her to the tower himself in his 15-year-old pickup because Victoria had refused the company car. Lily sat in the back. Diane and Catherine followed behind. And in the passenger seat, Victoria Whitmore rode up toward the building she'd built with a wheelchair folded in the truck bed and a cane across her lap, and she did not say a word the whole way. "You don't have to do it standing," Ethan said quietly as they pulled up. "The evidence does the job on its own. You can roll in there and win just the same. Nobody would think less of you, especially not me." "I know." "Then why?" Victoria looked out the windshield at the tower, at the doors, at the life a man had tried to take from her while telling her he loved her. "Because for 3 years, every person who ever hurt me did it while I was sitting down," she said. And I want the last thing Marcus Hale ever sees of the woman he tried to destroy to be her walking. Not the evidence, not the lawyer, her, on her feet. She turned to Ethan, and her eyes were wet and burning both at once. He needs to see it, and so do I. Ethan nodded. He didn't argue. He'd learned better. He got the cane. He got Diane on one side and himself close on the other, out of sight, ready. And they went up. The boardroom doors were closed when they reached them. Through the frosted glass, Ethan could see shapes of long table figures seated around it, and at the head standing, gesturing, holding forth in that warm, reasonable voice that carried faintly through the door. Marcus Hale telling the board with all the sorrow he could manufacture that their beloved Victoria was gone, that the doctors had confirmed it, that the time had come to move forward, that he would carry the weight so no one else had to. Victoria stood outside the doors, one hand on the cane, one hand gripping Ethan's forearm, her legs already trembling from the walk down the hall. She was white as paper. She was running on nothing. Ethan could feel her shaking through his sleeve. 4 steps, he murmured. The chair's right inside the door. I checked the layout. 4 steps, and you're there. I'll be right behind you the whole way. If you go down, I catch you, and we finish it in the chair, and it's still a win. You understand, there's no way to lose this now. There's only how you want to walk into it. Victoria closed her eyes. She took a breath. Ethan watched her gather 3 years of stolen strength, 6 weeks of secret work, 2 days of impossible pain, and every ounce of the fury and the will that had built an empire out of nothing. She let go of his arm. "Open the door," she said, and Ethan Carter reached out and pushed the boardroom door wide, and Marcus Hale's warm, grieving, victorious voice stopped dead in the middle of a sentence, and every head at that long table turned toward the doorway where Victoria Whitmore stood alone, unassisted on her own 2 feet, and took her first step back into her life. The step landed. Then another. And Marcus Hale's face did something Ethan Carter would carry with him for the rest of his days. It didn't go pale. That would have been too simple. It went blank the way a machine goes blank when you pull its power. All the warmth and the sorrow and the practiced concern draining out of it at once, leaving nothing behind but a man staring at something his mind refused to accept. The papers in his hand, Dr. Bell's assessment, the report declaring Victoria hopeless, dropped an inch forgotten. "Vicky," he said, and his voice cracked on the word. You're standing," Victoria said. "Yes." 4 steps. She reached the chair at the near end of the table and put both hands on its back, and she stood there swaying gray with effort, alive with fury, and she looked down the length of that long table at the man who had spent 3 years telling her to rest. The board sat frozen. 10 of the most powerful people in the state, and not one of them moved. Ethan stood just inside the doorway, close enough to catch her if she fell, and he watched every face at that table cycle through the same 3 things in the same order. Shock, confusion, and then slowly the dawning horror of people realizing they had been part of something they didn't understand. "Sit down, Victoria," Marcus said, and the warmth came flooding back into his voice too fast, too desperate. "Please, you'll hurt yourself. Someone get her a chair, she shouldn't be on her feet, she's not well." "Don't." Victoria's voice cut across his like a blade. "Don't you dare tell this room I'm not well. Not you. Never again you." "Vicky." 3 years ago, Victoria said, and though her legs were shaking, her voice was not, "I refuse to sell this company. You remember that meeting, Marcus? I attended it remotely from home, 6 weeks after my accident. I told this board that Whitmore Technologies was not for sale, and that I intended to return to full leadership as soon as I was able." She tightened her grip on the chair. "And do you know what happened that very same week?" Marcus said nothing. The blankness was creeping back. "Someone reconfigured my wheelchair," Victoria said. "A wheelchair specifically built to help me recover. Someone disabled the rehabilitation system. Someone maxed out the powered assist, so I'd never use my own muscles again. Someone set the whole thing up to make certain that I would stay exactly as weak as I was that week, for as long as it took." She let the silence hang. For 3 years, it turned out. A murmur ran around the table. Ethan saw one of the board members, an older man with silver glasses, turn slowly to look at Marcus. "That's a serious accusation," Marcus said, And now the smooth was coming back, the recovery, the man who'd talked his way out of 1,000 rooms. Victoria, you've been through an enormous ordeal, and I understand truly, I do, that you need someone to blame. But this is a fantasy. Wheelchairs don't get sabotaged. You're unwell, you're overwrought, and frankly this display. He gestured at her trembling legs. This is exactly why the board needs to consider whether you're fit to. The reconfiguration, Victoria said, was logged under your credential, Marcus. The room went utterly silent. Every setting change on a medical chair like mine gets recorded, Victoria continued, and her voice was gaining strength even as her body lost it. The date, the time, the device that made the change, the login that authorized it. 6 weeks after my accident, in a single session, someone shut down my recovery, and the credential that authorized it was yours. That could be anyone. Credentials get shared, that proves nothing. Then let's talk about this morning, Victoria said. And Ethan watched Marcus Hale's face, and he saw the exact moment the man understood he was not walking out of that room the way he'd walked in. This morning, Victoria said. At 8 o'clock, my attorney filed a complete report with this board, with the court, and with the district attorney's office. Every one of you received it. She looked around the table. Check your phones. I'll wait. Nobody checked their phones. Nobody had to. Ethan could see it on their faces. Several of them already had in the long frozen minutes since the doors opened, and the ones who hadn't could read it plainly on the ones who had. It includes the service logs, Victoria said. It includes a sworn statement from Dr. Anna Petrov, an independent rehabilitation specialist with no connection to this company or this state, verifying that my injury was incomplete, that I had documented measurable nerve function this entire time, and that a genuine recovery was possible from the beginning, a recovery that was deliberately prevented. She paused. And it includes a recording, made yesterday, in my home. When Marcus brought his own physician, Dr. Bell, to conduct what he called a routine assessment, Marcus had gone very still. Dr. Bell examined me, Victoria said, and declared for the record that I showed no improvement and no hope of recovery. And then Marcus, believing I couldn't hear him, believing I was the same helpless woman he'd manufactured, instructed Dr. Bell to sign the falsified assessment. His exact words. She looked down the table at him. Would you like me to play it, Marcus? Or would you like to tell them yourself what you said the board needed by Friday? The silence in that room had weight. It pressed down on everyone in it. And Marcus Hale, cornered, exposed, watching 3 years of patient work collapse in 90 seconds, did what men like Marcus always do when the warm voice stops working. He got ugly. You ungrateful. He caught himself, but not fast enough, and the mask was gone now, well and truly gone, and what was underneath it was something cold. Do you have any idea what I did for this company while you sat in that house feeling sorry for yourself? I kept it alive. I made the hard decisions you were too weak to make. I built what you couldn't finish. And you want to stand there barely and accuse me of running things while you were incapacitated. Someone had to. I wasn't incapacitated, Victoria said quietly. You made me look incapacitated. There's a difference, and everyone in this room just learned it. You can't prove intent. Just sign it. Bell, the board needs it by Friday. Victoria quoted it flat word for word, and Ethan saw Marcus flinch like he'd been struck. That's intent, Marcus. That's your voice in my house directing a doctor to lie about my medical condition so that this board would strip me of my company. The district attorney has it. The court has it. And now everyone at this table has heard it. She straightened, drawing on some reserve Ethan couldn't fathom. You didn't run the company while I was incapacitated. You worked for 3 years to keep me incapacitated so you could run the company. And you got caught because you got arrogant. You stopped being careful. You were so certain I was nothing that you said it out loud. The Silver Glasses board member stood up slowly. Marcus, he said, and his voice was shaking with something that might have been rage. Is this true? Harold? Is this true? Harold's voice rose. Because I sat in this room 3 years ago, and I voted to give you emergency operational authority out of concern for Victoria. I have spent 3 years believing I was helping a sick friend. And if you are telling me that I was actually helping you... He couldn't finish. He pressed a hand to his mouth. "You didn't know, Harold," Victoria said, and there was something almost gentle in it now, directed at the man, not at Marcus. "None of you knew. That was the whole design. He didn't just deceive me. He deceived every one of you. He used your decency against you. Your concern for me became the tool he used to steal everything. That's what makes it so ugly. He didn't fight fair and win. He turned the kindness of good people into a weapon." She looked around the table. "I'm not angry at this board. You were lied to same as I was. I'm angry at exactly one man." And here Ethan saw the thing he'd learned about Victoria Whitmore over 6 weeks laid bare in front of a boardroom, that underneath the steel and the fury was somebody who had once been generous and who was fighting her way back to being that person again. But Marcus wasn't done. Cornered animals never are. "You want to talk about the recording," Marcus said, and a new light came into his eyes, desperate and vicious. "Let's talk about how you got it. Let's talk about the man standing in the doorway." He pointed at Ethan. "Because I've been asking around Victoria. You think I don't hear things? A repairman, a handyman with a toolbox. That's who's been in your house every day for 6 weeks. That's who set up this little theater." He turned to the board, and his voice took on the reasonable tone again, the poison tone. "She's not well. She's been isolated. She's been manipulated by an opportunist who saw a rich, vulnerable woman and moved in. This entire performance was orchestrated by a stranger with no medical credentials. No." 15 years, Ethan said. It was the first thing he'd said since the doors opened, and every head in the room turned to him. Ethan hadn't planned to speak. It wasn't his room. But something about hearing Marcus Hale try to twist the one clean thing in this whole mess into something dirty made him step forward, and his voice when it came was quiet and steady, and it filled the room in a way Marcus's never could. "I was a mechanical engineer for 15 years, Ethan said. "Aerospace, then medical devices. I helped design spinal rehabilitation systems for a research hospital. Systems a lot like the one built into Ms. Whitmore's chair, the one you disabled." He kept his eyes on Marcus. "I didn't move in on a vulnerable woman, Mr. Hale. I got called to fix a wheelchair. And I did what I've done every day for 30 years, which is, I checked everything. Because that's the job. You don't guess. You don't assume. You open it up and you look." He paused. "And what I found was that somebody had reached inside a sick woman's only means of recovery and switched it off. On purpose. So I turned it back on. That's the whole crime you're accusing me of. I turned it back on." Nobody spoke. "You want to know why she trusts me, and not you?" Ethan went on, and his voice roughed. "It's real simple. You spent 3 years telling her she was broken. I spent 6 weeks proving she wasn't. That's the difference. That's the only difference. And every person at this table can see it, because it's standing up in front of you on its own 2 feet." Victoria, gripping the chair, looked at Ethan, and for just a moment, the boardroom and Marcus and the whole war fell away, and there was only the two of them. And the thing that had been building between them for 6 weeks, unspoken in the pain and the sweat and the shared secret. Then she turned back to the table. "Dr. Petrov lands this afternoon," she said. "She's flying in to conduct a full independent examination and testify to my condition. Every claim in that report will be verified by a specialist. Marcus has never met and cannot touch. So this isn't my word against his anymore. It's the machine's record and independent doctor's findings and his own voice on tape." She looked at Marcus one last time. "It's over, Marcus. You lost the second I stood up." And then the doors opened again. Ethan turned, and so did everyone, and standing in the doorway were 2 people. One was Catherine Reyes, Victoria's lawyer, briefcase in hand, face grim and triumphant. The other was a man Ethan didn't recognize in a plain dark suit holding a badge. "Marcus Hale," the man said. Marcus's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Detective Ramos, Financial Crimes Unit. I'd like to ask you some questions about medical fraud conspiracy and the tampering evidence submitted to my office this morning." The detective's eyes moved around the room and settled briefly on Victoria, standing at the head of the table. "Ms. Whitmore, your attorney said I'd find him here. She also said," a flicker of something like admiration, "she said you insisted on being here to see it, on your feet." "I did," Victoria said. But here was where it almost went wrong. Here was the twist Ethan didn't see coming, and neither did Victoria, and it nearly cost them everything, even in the moment of winning. Because Marcus Hale, watching the detective walk toward him, watching his entire life collapse, did the last desperate thing a cornered man can do. He stopped fighting the accusation, and he changed the story. "She's right," Marcus said suddenly loudly to the whole room. "She's right. I did it." The room froze. Even the detective stopped. "I disabled the chair. I brought the doctor. All of it. It's true." Marcus's voice was shaking, but there was calculation under it, cold and fast, and Ethan felt his stomach drop because he could see the man building something even now, even here. "But you want to know why? You want to know why I did it?" He turned to the board, and tears, real or manufactured Ethan couldn't tell, stood in his eyes. "Because she asked me to." "That's a lie," Victoria said. "Is it?" Marcus rounded on her, and now the poison was flowing freely. 3 years ago, you were destroyed, Vicky. You wanted to disappear. You told me you couldn't face running the company like that, broken, pitied, wheeled into meetings like an invalid. You begged me to take over. You said you never wanted to recover if recovery meant everyone watching you struggle." He turned back to the board, spreading his hands, the picture of a tormented friend. "I did a terrible thing. I gave a grieving woman what she asked for. And now she's ashamed of that weakness, and she's rewritten it, and she's found a handyman to help her build a story where she's the victim and I'm the villain. But I have known this woman for 20 years, and I am telling you she asked me to let her disappear." And for one horrible moment, Ethan watched it work. He watched doubt move across the faces at that table. Because it was plausible. That was the genius of it, the pure evil genius. It took the truth that Victoria had been at her lowest, that she had once wanted to give up, and it bent that truth into a shape that made Marcus a reluctant accomplice instead of an architect. Ethan saw Harold, the silver glasses man, hesitate. He saw the detective's certainty flicker. He saw, worst of all, a shadow cross Victoria's own face, because there had been dark days early on when she'd said things she didn't mean, and Marcus knew it, and he was using her own despair against her one final time. "Victoria," Harold said slowly, "did you ever in those early days say anything that he could have—" "No," Victoria started, but her voice wavered because she was exhausted and shaking, and being asked to prove a negative about the worst period of her life, and Ethan saw her losing it. Saw the room tilting back toward Marcus, saw 3 years of patient evil about to be laundered into a sad misunderstanding. "The dates don't work." Ethan's voice again, flat, certain, cutting through the room. Everyone looked at him. "The dates don't work," he repeated, and he pulled out his phone and his hands were steady. "Mr. Hale says Victoria asked him to let her disappear in her grief in those early days." "Fine. Let's check that against the machine, because the machine keeps time, and the machine doesn't get grief-stricken, and it doesn't rewrite anything." He looked up at the board. The chair was reconfigured on a specific date, 6 weeks after the accident. "I have the exact timestamp, and here's the thing about that date." He held up the phone. "It's not in the early days, it's not in the raw grief. It's the same week to the day that Victoria attended a board meeting remotely and refused to sell the company. You all remember that meeting. It's in the corporate record. She didn't ask to disappear that week. That week she stood up to him. That week she told this board she was coming back." The room went silent again, but it was a different silence now. "A grieving woman who wanted to vanish," Ethan said, "does not spend that same week fighting to keep her company. Those two things can't both be true. Either she wanted to give up, or she wanted to come back and lead. And the corporate record, your record not mine, says she wanted to come back. So Mr. Hale didn't disable her recovery because she asked him to." Ethan lowered the phone. "He disabled it because she refused him. The chair got sabotaged the exact week she told him no. That's not mercy for a grieving friend. That's punishment for a woman who wouldn't sell. And the dates prove it because I checked everything. I always check everything." Marcus Hale opened his mouth. And this time, nothing came out at all. Because there was no answer. The timestamp sat there in the record immovable, and it turned his entire desperate story inside out. He hadn't helped a woman disappear. He'd punished a woman for standing up to him on the exact week she did it, and the machine had written down the date. Harold sank back into his chair, his face gray. "My God," he said quietly. It's true. All of it. He looked at Marcus with an expression Ethan hoped he'd never have aimed at himself. You let us mourn her. You let us grieve a woman who was sitting in a house you'd locked her into. And every Thursday you went and held her hand. Harold, Marcus started. Don't. Harold stood and his voice broke. Don't ever say my name again. Detective Ramos stepped forward and took Marcus Hale gently by the arm and read him his rights in the flat professional voice of a man who'd done it 1,000 times. And Marcus didn't resist, because there was nothing left to resist with. The warm voice was gone. The reasonable tone was gone. Every mask he'd worn for 20 years had come off in the space of 10 minutes, and what was left was just a man being walked out of a room he'd thought he owned. At the door he stopped. He turned back and looked at Victoria still standing, still gripping that chair, and for a moment, Ethan thought he might try one last poison. But what Marcus said quietly almost to himself was worse than any accusation. You were supposed to stay down, he said. It wasn't cruel. It was baffled. Genuinely baffled, like a man who'd solved an equation 100 times and couldn't understand why the answer had changed. I did everything right. You were supposed to stay down. I know, Victoria said. That was your whole mistake. You thought staying down was a thing that happened to me. She looked at him with something that was past anger, now something almost like pity. It was always a choice, Marcus. You just made sure I never knew I had one. Goodbye. And the detective walked him out. The moment the door closed, Victoria's legs gave out. She'd held herself up through the entire thing on nothing but will, and the second she didn't need to anymore, her body simply stopped and she started to go down. But Ethan was already moving, had been ready the whole time, had never once stopped watching her, and he crossed the room in 3 strides and caught her before she hit the floor and eased her down into the chair she'd been gripping. I've got you, he said quietly just for her. I've got you. You did it. It's done. I've got you. Victoria clung to his arm, shaking drenched gray and utterly, completely triumphant. And then she started to cry, not the careful, ashamed tears he'd seen in the early weeks, but great heaving sobs, 3 years of them, the whole poisoned weight of it coming out at once, now that it was finally safe to fall apart. The board sat in stunned silence around them. Catherine stood in the doorway with her hand over her mouth. And somewhere in the back of the room, a small voice that did not belong in a boardroom at all, piped up because Lily had slipped in behind Catherine and seen the whole end of it. Dad, Lily said, awed. The spy lady walked, and Victoria Whitmore, crying into the shoulder of a repairman she'd thrown out of her house 6 weeks ago, laughed through her tears and reached out one shaking hand toward the little girl and managed to say, I did, sweetheart. I really did. Later, after the board had voted unanimously to restore her authority, after they'd voted just as unanimously to cooperate fully with the district attorney, after Harold had come and taken both her hands and asked forgiveness, she gave more easily than he deserved. Victoria sat in the emptying boardroom with Ethan beside her and Lily on his knee, and she was quiet for a long time. He almost had them, she finally said. At the end, when he said I asked him to. For a moment I saw them believe him. She stopped. For a moment I wondered if I'd made it true somehow. If some part of me really had wanted to disappear and he was just, you didn't. How do you know you weren't there 3 years ago? You don't know what I said in those first weeks. I know you fought him the week he sabotaged you, Ethan said simply. I know that because the machine knows it. Everything else is a story people tell, but the date is the date. He looked at her. That's why I always check everything, Victoria. Not because I don't trust people. Because people forget, and people lie, and people get so deep in the grief or the fear that they can't see what's true anymore. But the metal remembers. The metal always remembers. And this time the metal remembered. You were a fighter even on the day you'd half forgotten it yourself. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. You keep saying you fix things, she said. Machines, wheelchairs, broken engines. That's the job. That's not the job. Her voice was soft and steadier now, and something in it made Ethan's chest go tight. 6 weeks ago, you knelt down on my floor and found a bolt everyone else missed. And I thought you were fixing a chair. But you weren't fixing the chair, Ethan. You were fixing the one thing everybody in my life had given up on. She reached out and took his rough, scarred hand in hers and held it. "You checked everything, when no one else would even look." Ethan didn't have an answer for that. For once, the quiet man had nothing to say at all. So he just held her hand in the emptying room with his daughter asleep against his chest and the woman he'd found alone and hopeless. Now sitting beside him, restored to everything she'd lost, and understood that whatever came next, whatever this was that had grown between them in 6 weeks of pain and secrets and stolen sessions, it was the first thing in 4 years that had made him feel like the man he used to be, before the world took his wife and left him fixing other people's broken things in a cold garage at 4 in the morning. Outside the tower, the afternoon was ending. Dr. Petrov's plane was landing. There would be examinations and testimony, and a long road of real recovery still ahead, and a trial and headlines, and all the ordinary hard work of a life rebuilt. But that was tomorrow. Today, Victoria Whitmore had walked, and Ethan Carter had watched her do it. And neither of them, for the first time in a very long time, was alone. The road back was longer than the walk into that boardroom, and Ethan Carter had known it would be. The morning after, Marcus Hale was walked out of Whitmore Technologies in handcuffs. Victoria couldn't get out of bed. Her body had spent everything it had and then borrowed against everything it didn't, and now the bill came due all at once. Every muscle screamed. Her legs, which had carried her 4 impossible steps, refused to carry her 4 inches. And when Ethan arrived at the estate that morning with Lily and a bag of donuts, he found Diane in the hallway with worry carved into her face. "She won't come out," Diane said. "She won't talk. She did the impossible thing, Mr. Carter, she won. And now she's lying in there like the fight went out of her all at once." Ethan handed Lily a donut and sent her to the kitchen. Then he knocked once on Victoria's door and went in without waiting for an answer, because he'd learned that waiting for Victoria's permission was a good way to never get anywhere. She was on the bed on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling. "Go away," she said. "No." "Ethan, I mean it. I don't have anything left. I gave it all to that room yesterday. There's nothing here." Her voice was hollow. "I keep waiting to feel triumphant. Everyone keeps calling to congratulate me, and I just feel empty. He's gone. I won. And I don't feel anything but tired." Ethan pulled a chair over to the bed and sat down. "That's not emptiness," he said. "That's what it feels like when you finally set down something you've been carrying so long you forgot you were carrying it. Your arms don't feel free. They feel dead, because they've been holding the same weight for 3 years and they don't remember how to be anything else." He looked at her. "Sarah was sick for a long time. When she died, everybody kept telling me the grief would come. And it did eventually. But the first thing that came wasn't grief. It was this. Exactly this. Lying on top of the covers, staring at nothing, because the thing that had been running your whole life just stopped." Victoria turned her head and looked at him. "How long does it last? Longer than you want. Shorter than you're afraid of." Ethan leaned forward. "But here's what I learned, and it's the only thing I know for sure. It doesn't lift because you rest. It lifts because you get up and do the next small thing. Not the big thing. Not walking into another boardroom. The next small thing." He nodded at the floor beside the bed. "Right now, the next small thing is sitting up and eating a donut with a kid who thinks you hung the moon. That's it. That's the whole task. You don't have to feel triumphant. You just have to sit up." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "You're very annoying," she said finally. "I've been told." And then slowly gritting her teeth against a body that fought her every inch. Victoria Whitmore sat up. Ethan didn't help her. He'd learned that too, when to catch her and when to let her do the small impossible thing herself. She got upright, breathing hard, and she looked at him with the ghost of the old fire coming back into her eyes. "Donut," she said. "That's my girl." The word slipped out before he could catch it, and they both heard it, and for a second, the air changed. Ethan felt his face go warm. Victoria looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. Neither of them said anything about it. But something had been named quietly in a bedroom on a bad morning, and they both knew it. Dr. Anna Petrov arrived that afternoon, and if anyone still had doubts about what Ethan had found, she erased them within the hour. She was a small, intense woman with gray hair cut short and hands that moved over Victoria's legs with the confidence of 30 years of practice. She ran her own tests, her own scans, her own measurements, and when she was done, she sat back and looked at Victoria with a professional composure that couldn't quite hide the anger underneath. "I want to be very clear with you," Dr. Petrov said, "because I think you've had 3 years of people being unclear with you on purpose, and you deserve the truth stated plainly." She set down her chart. "Your injury was incomplete. Significantly incomplete. With appropriate rehabilitation beginning immediately after your accident, you would very likely have regained substantial function within 18 months. Possibly full function. The recovery you achieved in 6 weeks with Ethan's makeshift program under conditions I would never have approved. I'll add they were dangerous, and you're lucky you didn't hurt yourself. That recovery should have been happening slowly and safely for 3 years. Victoria's jaw tightened. "So I lost 3 years." "You lost 3 years of recovery," Dr. Petrov agreed. "But here is the part I need you to hear because it matters more." She leaned forward. "You did not lose the recovery itself. It was waiting for you. The nerve pathways were intact. Buried dormant, ignored, but intact. Marcus Hale did a monstrous thing, and he cost you time, and rehabilitation is precious and can't be bought back. But he could not take the recovery away. He could only delay it. And now," she almost smiled, "now you get it back. Slower than you'd like. With real medical support this time, not a repairman and a prayer. But you will walk Ms. Whitmore. Not in dramatic 4-step bursts that nearly put you in the hospital. Properly. Fully. It's going to take a year, maybe more. And then you're going to walk out of it and never sit in that chair again unless you choose to." The room was silent. "A year," Victoria said. "A year of hard work. Real work. The kind that doesn't have a boardroom at the end of it to make it feel worth it. Just the work." Dr. Petrov held her gaze. "Can you do a year of that without an enemy to fight? Because that's the part most people can't do. It's easy to be strong when there's a villain. It's hard to be strong when there's just Tuesday." And Ethan watched Victoria absorb that, and he saw her understand it, and he saw something in her settle. "I've had a villain running my recovery for 3 years, Victoria said. "I think I can manage a year of Tuesdays." She looked at Ethan. "As long as I don't have to do the Tuesdays alone." "You won't," Ethan said before he'd even decided to say it. The trial, when it came months later, was almost an anticlimax. Marcus Hale's lawyers tried everything. They tried the story he'd tried in the boardroom that Victoria had asked to disappear, and it collapsed exactly the way it had collapsed the first time on the immovable rock of a timestamp that showed the sabotage happened the same week she'd fought to keep her company. They tried to discredit Ethan, painting him as an opportunist, and that collapsed too, because 15 years of engineering credentials and a spotless record don't bend easily, and because Ethan Carter on the witness stand was exactly what he was everywhere else: quiet, plain, and impossible to rattle. "Mr. Carter," Marcus's lawyer had said in a tone dripping with insinuation, "you spent 6 weeks alone with a wealthy, vulnerable woman. You expect this jury to believe you did that out of pure altruism." And Ethan had looked at the lawyer and then at the jury and said, "No, sir, I didn't do it out of altruism. I did it because when I found what was done to her, I couldn't unfind it. You don't leave a person locked in something once you've seen the lock. I've got a daughter. Someday she might be in a hard spot, and I have to believe that if she is, somebody will check on her. Really check. Not just take the easy story." He'd paused. "That's not altruism. That's just how I'd want the world to work. So I try to be the part of it I can reach." Later, Diane told him the jury foreman had been nodding. Dr. Petrov testified. The service logs were entered into evidence, authenticated by forensic experts who confirmed they hadn't been altered. Dr. Bell, facing charges of his own, turned on Marcus completely and testified that yes, Marcus had instructed him to falsify the assessment, and yes, this had been going on for years, and yes, he'd known it was wrong and done it anyway for money. The recording played in open court, and the whole room heard Marcus Hale's warm, caring voice tell a doctor to lie, and then moments later heard him hold Victoria's hand and tell her to rest. The jury took 4 hours. Guilty. On every count. Medical fraud conspiracy and a raft of financial crimes that came spilling out once investigators started pulling the thread. Marcus Hale, who had spent 20 years making people feel important, and 3 years making one woman feel worthless, was sentenced to a stretch of years long enough that Ethan did the math and realized the man would be old when he came out, if he came out at all. Victoria was in the courtroom for the verdict, standing. She'd insisted on it the same way she'd insisted on walking into the boardroom, and this time it cost her far less because 6 months of real rehabilitation had done what 6 frantic weeks couldn't. She stood on her own, steady, a cane in one hand she barely needed, and she watched them lead Marcus away, and she did not gloat, and she did not weep. She just watched until he was gone, and then she turned to Ethan and said quietly, "That's the last time I ever have to look at him." "Yeah," Ethan said. "It is." "Good." She let out a long breath. "Then I'm done with him. Truly done. I've given that man 3 years of my life, and I'm not giving him one more day of my thoughts." She looked around the emptying courtroom. "Take me home, Ethan. I want to see Lily. She promised to teach me to make those pancakes." The recovery filled the year the way Dr. Petrov had promised. It was not dramatic. That was the strange, hard beauty of it, after all the theater of boardrooms and courtrooms and impossible 4-step walks. The real recovery was just work day after day, the unglamorous grind of a body relearning itself. There were good days and bad days. There were plateaus that lasted weeks and made Victoria want to throw things, and Ethan learned to just let her learn that sometimes the woman needed to hurl a water bottle across the room and curse the universe before she could get back to the parallel bars. But she got back to them. Every time. And slowly, week by week, the cane got used less. The steps got surer. The distance got longer. And somewhere in the middle of that long, quiet year, without either of them making a decision about it, Ethan Carter stopped being the repairman who came up the ridge and started being something else. It happened in pieces the way real things do. It happened the evening Lily fell asleep on Victoria's couch, and Ethan didn't want to wake her, and Victoria said simply, "There's a guest room, stay." And he did. And in the morning, the 3 of them ate breakfast together, like it was the most natural thing in the world, and nobody remarked on it, because remarking on it would have made it fragile. It happened the afternoon. Victoria came to Ethan's house for the first time, his small plain house with the garage that smelled of coffee and cold metal, and instead of the pity or the awkwardness he'd braced for. She walked through it slowly, touching things, and stopped at a photo of Sarah on the mantel, and stood there a long moment, and then said, "She was beautiful. Tell me about her." And Ethan, who had not been able to talk about his wife for 4 years, found that he could talk about her to this woman, and did for 2 hours, and felt something that had been clenched shut in his chest for 4 years, finally gently open. It happened 100 small ways. And then one day Ethan realized that the ache he'd carried since Sarah died, the specific hollow loneliness of a man who fixes everything except himself, was gone. Not filled, not replaced. Just somehow healed over the way a break heals into something that could bear weight again. "You know what's strange?" Victoria said one evening near the end of that year. They were on her porch, Lily chasing fireflies in the yard, and Victoria was standing at the rail, no cane steady as anyone. "I spent 3 years believing that chair was the worst thing that ever happened to me. The symbol of everything I lost. My independence. My company. Myself." She watched Lily leap after a light in the dark. "And now I look back, and I don't think that's true anymore. No. The chair didn't take anything from me. Marcus took things from me, and the chair was just the tool he used. But the chair itself..." She paused. "If that chair hadn't started feeling wrong, I never would have called a repairman. And if I hadn't called a repairman, I'd still be sitting in it thanking Marcus for the flowers." She turned to look at him. "The thing I thought was the symbol of everything I lost turned out to be the thing that led me to everything I got back. It's the strangest math. The worst thing in my life became the road to the best." Ethan came to stand beside her at the rail. "That's not strange," he said. "That's just how it works mostly. Nobody goes looking for the thing that saves them. It shows up disguised as the thing that's breaking them." He watched his daughter in the dark. "I didn't want to fix wheelchairs, Victoria. When I lost my job and Sarah died, and I ended up in that garage at 4 in the morning fixing other people's broken things, I thought that was the bottom. I thought that was the punishment. Turned out it was the road too. If I'd stayed an engineer, I'd never have gotten the call about your chair. The worst year of my life is the only reason I was standing in your study that morning." He shook his head slowly. "The bottom and the road, same place. You just can't tell which is which until you're a long way past it." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and took his hand the way she had in the boardroom, the way she had a dozen times over that long year. "Ethan," she said, "I'm offering you a job." He looked at her surprised. "You're what?" "Whitmore Technologies is starting a new division, Accessibility Technology, real rehabilitation equipment designed by people who understand what it's actually like to sit in the chair built to help people recover instead of keeping them dependent." Her voice was steady and certain. "The kind of equipment that if it had existed and been used properly, would have had me walking 2 years sooner. I want you to lead it, design it. You're the only person I know who has the engineering to build it and the heart to build it right." She squeezed his hand. "I've watched you for a year. You don't just fix things, Ethan. You refuse to let people be written off. That's not a skill you can hire. That's who you are. And I want it building the future of this company." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "That's a real job," he said. "Salary, badge, parking spot. All of it. I gave that up once, on purpose. To be home with Sarah, and then to be home with Lily." He looked out at his daughter. "I'm not sure I'm the man who has a parking spot anymore. You'd set your own hours. You'd work from wherever you wanted. Lily could do her homework in your office." Victoria turned to face him fully. "I'm not asking you to become someone else, Ethan. I'm asking you to keep being exactly who you are, except now with the resources to do it for thousands of people, instead of one wheelchair at a time. Every person out there who's been written off by someone who found it convenient, you could be the man who checks everything. For all of them." Her eyes held his. "You told a courtroom, you try to be the part of the world you can reach. Let me make what you can reach a whole lot bigger." And Ethan Carter, the single dad repairman, who had once believed that fixing broken things in a cold garage was the whole of what his life would ever be looked at. The woman he'd found alone and hopeless a year ago, now standing on her own 2 feet, offering him back a version of himself he'd thought was gone forever. "Lily gets to pick the paint color for the office," he said. Victoria laughed the full, unguarded laugh he'd first heard the day a little girl called her a spy. "Done." "Then yes," Ethan said. "I'll take the job." But that wasn't the whole of it, and they both knew it, and it was Lily, of course, who said the thing the 2 adults had been circling for a year and never quite landed on. She came running up onto the porch out of breath. A firefly cupped in her hands, and she looked up at the 2 of them standing close at the rail, hands joined, and she asked with the total directness of an 8-year-old the question that changed everything. "Are you going to get married?" The porch went very quiet. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at Victoria, and Victoria looked at him, and for a moment neither of them said anything, and the firefly glowed between Lily's fingers. "Lily," Ethan started, "because Miss Diane says you 2 are being ridiculous," Lily plowed on, "and that everybody can see it except you, and that grown-ups are dumb about this stuff." Her words. "And I think Victoria should be my other mom because she teaches me pancakes, and she lets me pick paint, and she's not sad like you used to be." She opened her hands, and the firefly rose up into the dark. "And you're not sad anymore either, Dad." So, and there it was, laid out on a porch by a child. The truth 2 grown adults had been too careful and too scarred to say out loud. Ethan looked at Victoria. And Victoria, who had faced down a boardroom and a courtroom and 3 years of a man's patient cruelty, without flinching, looked suddenly wonderfully uncertain. "She's not wrong," Victoria said quietly, "about any of it, including the part where we're being ridiculous. Diane said that. Diane's been saying that for months, to me at least." A small smile. "I told her to mind her plate. She reminded me how that worked out the last time I said it to her." Ethan laughed low and warm, and then he turned to face Victoria, and he took both her hands, and the quiet man who never had the right words found for once in his life that he had exactly the right ones. "I spent 4 years thinking the best part of my life was behind me," he said. "I thought I was a man whose job was to fix things other people gave up on, and that was all I'd ever be. And then I knelt down on your floor and found a bolt everybody missed, and I thought I was fixing your chair." He shook his head slowly. "I wasn't fixing your chair, Victoria. I was walking into the rest of my life. I just didn't know it yet. Same as you didn't know that broken chair was the road to getting everything back." He tightened his grip on her hands. "So no, I don't want to be ridiculous anymore. I've got a daughter who's already decided, and a woman standing in front of me who I have loved for longer than I've had the guts to say. I fix broken things for a living. But you're the thing that fixed me." Victoria's eyes filled. "Is that a proposal, Mr. Carter?" "It's a man who checks everything," Ethan said, finally checking the one thing he was too scared to look at. "Yeah, it's a proposal." "Then check your answer," Victoria said, and she stepped forward, steady, sure on her own 2 feet, the feet a man had tried to steal and a repairman had given back, and she kissed him there on the porch with an 8-year-old whooping in delight, and Diane watching from the doorway, where she'd been not so secretly listening, finally quietly wiping her eyes. They married in the spring. Victoria walked down the aisle. All the way unassisted, no cane steady and radiant past a room full of people who had once mourned her as good as gone. Dr. Petrov was there and she cried, which she claimed afterward was allergies. Harold gave a toast that started as a business tribute and turned into an apology and ended as something like a father's blessing. Diane was the maid of honor and pretended the whole time she wasn't the one who'd engineered the entire thing. And Lily was the flower girl, and she took the job with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. And at the reception, she told anyone who would listen the story of how her dad found a secret bolt in a spy lady's wheelchair, and it turned out to be the start of their whole family. The accessibility division launched that same year. Ethan built it the way he built everything, carefully, honestly checking every part. The equipment that came out of it was different from anything on the market because it was designed by a man who understood down in his bones that the worst thing you can do to a struggling person is decide for them that they're finished. Every device his team built had one principle underneath it: assume recovery is possible until the person themselves with real information decides otherwise. Never let anyone be written off for someone else's convenience. Check everything. Years later, a young engineer on Ethan's team asked him why he'd left a comfortable repair business to come build medical equipment, and whether he ever missed the simplicity of it. Ethan thought about it for a moment. "I spent a long time believing my job was to fix broken things," he said. "Machines, wheelchairs, engines that everybody else gave up on. And I was good at it, and it kept the lights on, and I thought that was the whole story." He looked out the window of the office his daughter had painted at the company he now helped lead at the life he'd built out of the wreckage of the one he'd lost. "But I was wrong about the job. The machines were never really the point. The biggest repair I ever made in my whole life wasn't a machine at all." "What was it?" the young engineer asked. Ethan smiled. "It was helping somebody remember who they were," he said, after the whole world had spent 3 years telling her she was somebody smaller. "That's the only repair that ever really mattered. Everything else is just bolts." Victoria Whitmore had believed once that her wheelchair was the symbol of everything she'd lost: her strength, her independence, herself. She'd been wrong. The wheelchair was never her weakness. It was the road that led her through the worst betrayal of her life, straight to the man who saw what everyone else ignored, straight back to her own 2 feet, straight into a family she never knew she was missing. Marcus Hale had tried to convince her she was broken, and for 3 years he'd almost succeeded. But he'd made one fatal mistake, the same mistake made by everyone who ever underestimated Victoria Whitmore, and by everyone who ever wrote off Ethan Carter as just a man with a toolbox. He forgot to check whether it was still true. And it never was. Victoria Whitmore was never broken. She was only waiting for one honest man to kneel down, look closer than anyone else dared, and prove it. And Ethan Carter, the single dad repairman who fixed what everyone else ignored, spent the rest of his life doing exactly that for her, for their daughter, and for every person the world had been too quick to give up on. Some things are only broken because someone convinced you they were. And the moment you find the truth, you were never broken at all.